To get started, usual format, names, pronouns, and the icebreaker. As always, I'll go first. Oh, and by the way, our icebreaker for today will be, what makes a good book for you? And I will go first. So, my name is Jonathan, pronouns are he, him. And for me, a good book is, I'm very particular, so I'll say like, it can be hard for me to really get a good book, but I think for me, a good book has minimal characters, minimal settings, is more reality based than fantasy based. And I like books that are very emotional, but that's tricky because I'm not into books that are sad just for the sake of being sad. I like books that like there is a feeling of hope or happiness towards the end, but it's a character that has to kind of maybe struggle to find the happiness in their life. I don't know, it's kind of hard to really describe what I consider to be a good book, but like when I find one, I know in my heart that it's one that I really enjoy. So, what about you?
Um, that's a lot. I'm curious for some of the books that are on your good books list. But my name's Michael. He,
Very
him
few.
pronouns. I think I read for I think two main reasons. So I'll give sort of two answers. But
Hmm.
if I'm reading more just for like entertainment or for escapism, I think that um, having something that I don't want to put down or that feels really satisfying always helps there. But if
Hmm.
I'm reading more to um I don't know, like challenge myself or challenge my schools of thought, then I think having something that leaves me like wanting to go back and reread stuff and asking more questions at the end instead of just being like, oh, I like that. I'm glad like everyone lived happily ever after. Um,
Hmm.
so I think I'll give those as my two answers.
Nice. Now I'm curious what's on your list, but we'll get to that later, I guess. Hey, new person. We're just going through our
Oh,
intros. Oh, are you Arian?
yeah.
Okay,
Okay, good.
okay. So we're just doing intros, names, pronouns, and then the icebreaker question, which for today will be, what makes a good book for you? And we both have gone, so I guess you can go ahead and go next.
Okay, sorry for missing y'all's answer. Um,
That's okay.
um, I guess what makes a good book for me is if it entertains me, which isn't that hard. I think I have a low threshold for entertainment, which is a good thing and a bad thing. Um, I also like it when it teaches me stuff that I haven't known before. It gives me an opportunity to learn things. Like when I was reading the book, I was just highlighting or underlining the words, the Spanish words that I didn't know, and just saving it for later. Um,
Hmm.
that's one of my favorite parts of a book is when I see a word that I'm unfamiliar with and I could just pluck it and then Google it later. Yeah, it's fun. Um, yeah, I like what Michael said about challenging your thoughts. Um, I think that's what he said, if I made it to that part correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also love it when books do that. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Well, I will ask the very loaded question. What did you two think of The House of Impossible Beauties by Joseph Cassara?
Um, I'll go ahead if that's okay.
Hmm.
I felt a little very kind of in the middle of the road about it. It was a lot in a lot of different ways. It was I think for me like a lot of characters and things to try and keep up with, and just a lot of like disaster and trauma. I don't know. That wasn't necessarily like the most fun thing to read sometimes.
Mm.
But I mean, I did enjoy the storyline and the setting, and definitely some of the character development. Uh, and I know we've got like a lot of ballroom pop culture stuff, and I don't think I have um, like read any books that cover the subject, so nice to like add that to a list of like references and stories. But that's it for my answer.
I would have never read a book like this if it wasn't for this book club. So I guess that's nice. It made me realize that I didn't know quite a few things about ballroom culture and the AIDS epidemic in America. So I guess I'm gonna research about that. I'm already watching Paris is Burning. I'm halfway through the documentary, so it's nice. The book itself, oh, damn, I couldn't read. I had to skim through some parts of the book because I couldn't read it. I really liked the dynamics of all the characters together. Yeah, I, I'm middle of the road, but leaning towards liking it. It's just a lot. It's a lot. Yeah.
Well, I gotta be honest. I am 0 for 3, unfortunately. I can't even say I'm in the middle of the road like you two. I won't say I hated this book. I think that would be unfair. There are certain things I can appreciate, but for the most part, to be brutally honest, this is one of my least favorite books I've ever read. Probably my least favorite that we've read in this club so far, and that's saying a lot. I couldn't really find much to like. I think that I found a lot of the scenes to be inappropriate. I found a lot of the characters to be disrespectful to their real life counterparts. Um, and yeah, I'll leave it there because I don't want to go into depth on our general thoughts question. But I guess my next question is, I know Arian, you said that you're in the middle of watching Paris is Burning. Have you ever seen Paris is Burning, Michael?
I have not.
Well, I watched it yesterday, and I think that in order to really kind of get a good like grip on this book, you have to have seen it. I just feel like this book doesn't really do the best to like give us an insight on ballroom culture or what the scenes or the balls actually look like. Um, I believe we only get like one scene that's actually in the ballroom or in one of the balls, and we'll get there eventually. But that to me is very odd for a book that is trying to center ballroom culture and, of course, one of the most iconic houses in the ballroom scene. That was odd to me. Also, I found a lot of the historical inaccuracies quite troublesome, especially the ones surrounding the AIDS epidemic. Uh, there are just some things that are totally inaccurate, totally false, totally like made up out of the author's hat. And I mean, I know it's a fictionalized historical story, but I do think if it's meant to be for a younger audience, like I believe all of us are, who did not live in the 80s, if you're going to write a book centered around that time period, it's important to be accurate so that we can really know what it was like for the queer community in the 80s. And this book, I think, just does not accomplish that at all, which made it very hard for me to get through. And I will also say that there's one scene in particular that if I was reading this book and it wasn't for this club, I would have put this book down, probably returned it, gave it back to my library, wrote a good reads review because I just couldn't get much further. But I did finish it, so yeah, that's a lot of thoughts, but that's what I think of the book overall. So okay, um, I guess my first question is, do you guys think that? I guess, do any of you have any knowledge of the ballroom scene, and or do you believe that you have to have some kind of knowledge of that in order to enjoy this book fully?
I'll say that I have not until it became like an element of pop culture whenever like 4 or 5 years ago. And for me, not really any exposure outside of outside of things like Pose or Beyonce doing a whole like thing inspired by all of this. But outside of that, not really. I also am like very disconnected from well, I can't use that as an excuse, but yeah, I'll stop there.
Yeah, aside from Drag Race, which I'm aware is pretty diluted from its roots, and I haven't even watched Pose either. So yeah, um, I think uh, I think having knowledge of ballroom would definitely affect your reading experience instead of fully enjoying it. I think um, the opposite happened with with you. But yeah, I'm pretty sure knowledge would have been more helpful in reading the book. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have much, really any, I guess, real life knowledge outside of, like Michael said, what you see in pop culture and like Arian said on Drag Race. I'm not from New York, never been, so I've never actually gone to a ball. I've had friends who have been in the ballroom scene, but outside of that, I don't have much experience. So after I finished this book, I did some research. I, of course, watched Paris is Burning. I watched a couple other documentaries surrounding some of the House of Extravaganza members and surrounding the ballroom scene. Um, so I got little tidbits. And I think that you kind of can't really fully enjoy this book unless you have some kind of knowledge. I guess for me, once I learned more, I disliked the book more, unfortunately, because I just don't think it really gives a comprehensive uh, I don't think it tells a comprehensive enough story about what exactly the ballroom scene means for queer people, especially queer people of color, and trans people, because this was kind of like all they had. There was really no, I mean, there were gay clubs, but not as many as there are now. And then most of those gay clubs were for white gay people. So the only space they really can go and like be free and be with their community was the ballroom scene. And I feel like this book just really failed on that, on expressing that to the reader. So yeah. And I guess my next question is, do you see a point in an author writing a fictionalized account about the lives of real people? And do you think it's a strength to do that rather than just writing an entirely fictional story with fictionalized characters?
I can go again. Um, I don't know how. Well, I guess I'll preface by saying one of my questions I did have in mind, and that I didn't really do any research to see, but I was curious about the author's motivation for writing this book and the timing of it. Um, but I don't know that like having real people and doing a only like partially fictionalized or just sensationalized version of them is gonna have like the best. I don't know if it doesn't really do any service to the real people, and it feels I don't know like taking something so something's there to work from maybe, but uh, I could also argue that there are examples like the other way. Like I've never seen like Hamilton, but it is based on real people and fictionalized and seems to be regarded by a lot of people as like a good way to do that. But that's my I'll stop there.
Okay. I guess I feel it has its place if you need to bring attention to a certain point of topic. You need to grab someone's hook. You need to hook their attention. So I feel like it has a place in that, but I feel like everyone already has a general gist of stuff that happened during that time. If not the whole picture, then, you know, a bit of the details. I came in reading the book not knowing that the characters were based off of actual people. So I feel like that definitely impacted my reading experience. Um, I I've read some reviews on the book when I was finished reading it, and even the names of the people were actual people, and um, I don't know how to feel about that now. So, um, I don't know. Um, I feel like they could have the book would have been just better if they were just entirely fictional. Because now that I know that they were based on real people, it kind of I don't know how to feel about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you, Arian. I'm not sure if I would say that I think it's always inappropriate to write a fictionalized story based on real people, but I do think if you're going to do it, it has to be with tact and respect. And I feel like this book doesn't accomplish that. It kind of reduces, in my opinion, all of the real people the story is based on to just like sex workers who were essentially either drug addicts or had HIV and then died, which I think is totally wrong considering just how impactful all of the members of the House of Extravaganza and their house in general was and still is to this day. Um, and I think to answer Michael's question, researched what Joseph Cassara's motivations were because I was just curious why someone would want to write this kind of book. And he essentially said that he had just seen Paris is Burning like 1,000 times and loved it and wanted to write a book about the House of Extravaganza. Um, and I won't say he did no research, but he has never attended a ball. He's not from New York City. He has no roots in the ballroom culture and didn't even interview anyone or speak to anyone who is in the ballroom scene. And I think that just explains why, at least for me, the book feels uh, disrespectful to the culture itself because he doesn't really have any knowledge on it. Um, so I guess my next question is it appropriate for someone that doesn't have any personal experience or any secondhand experience um, on a culture to then write about that culture? Or is that wrong?
I can start again. I don't thinking back to a lot of the other books that we've read. I don't think we've really had any other stories that do this, and I think that's probably for a good reason, that maybe you're trying to get at, but it does feel, which I guess is part of the reason for me asking my other question too. Um, I don't necessarily want to like say appropriation, but uh, there is value and importance in like telling a story because it's your story to tell and not like taking it or not. I mean, especially doing no research, you saying some of those things, which I always go in without doing too much research, if any, outside of what you're in the Discord. But this is one of those times that I kind of wish I had done some more because I mean, obviously would have pushed me definitely over the edge on how I responded to it. Yeah, that's it. I'll stop there.
Um. um I don't know. I feel like um you should know your limits on what you're writing. if you never had experience, um, secondhand or firsthand, uh, you could write about it, but not like, okay, I don't know where I'm going, but it kind of feels the vibe is off there. The vibe is off if you don't have firsthand or secondhand experience. You haven't done that much research. Uh, it's not giving. Yeah, there. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll agree with you too. I think to what Michael was saying, I do believe there of course is a, there's an importance in writing a story that belongs to you. But I also do think it's okay if you want to write a book about a community you don't belong to. Like I said earlier, as long as it's done with respect and with tact. But I do believe that when there are opportunities to do your research, to get secondhand experience, make sure you're doing that, or else you're just kind of like pulling things out of thin air. Which a lot of reviews that I've read who have been written by people who are in the ballroom scene have said like this book doesn't depict anything that like what an actual house is like, what the experience of going to a ball is like, what the experience of walking a category is like. Um, so yeah, but I guess a little bit to Joseph Cassara's defense, I think it's a little bit tricky because of course all of the members, or not all of them, there's one who's mentioned in this book who's still living, but the other three, of course, have passed away. Um, so I guess you, of course, can't speak to them, but the House of Extravaganza does still exist, and the current house mother was someone who was a child of Angel, or as she called herself, Angie Extravaganza. Um, and you could have like talked to him. I mean, yeah, he's famous, but he has an Instagram, and his DMs are open. Like, how hard is that? Um, or you could even talk to any of the other children who are in the house. And why Joseph didn't do that, I'm not sure. I don't know if it's a scheduling thing or maybe they were all too busy. I don't know. But I just think I don't really see the point in writing a book without even getting secondhand experience. And I think to kind of broaden the conversation a little bit, how would I feel about someone who is not a person of color writing a story about people of color without having even talked to a person of color? Just kind of writing it from their own perspective of a community they don't belong to. Would I like that? I don't think I would. So I don't know. It's a slippery slope, but I'll leave it there, I guess, because I can talk about that all day. But to get into the story a little bit, I figure we'll kind of go character by character since there's only really four main characters. So what did you guys think of Angel Extravaganza? Any general thoughts on her character at all?
I can go first again, unless you want to go first, Arian. I don't want to answer all the time if you don't want me to.
No, I'm fine. Unless you want me to answer first, then I'm fine with either. I'm just collecting my thoughts, I guess.
Okay. Okay. I'll let you. I'll let you collect your thoughts. Um, I don't. I don't. When we get into these like really trauma-filled storylines, I don't know how I respond to the characters sometimes, which I think is one of the things that for me made this book really a lot. Um, and I of course don't even think Angel is probably like has the most disastrous or traumatic things happening of all the people in the story. Um, but there are some things that I really appreciate, like this sense of sort of like tenacity and like ownership of building other people up that I think we get a good view of. But I'm also trying to, think of this in the context of like now knowing some of these other things that I didn't research, and trying to understand how I like place that with what I don't know that I don't know. Makes me, I don't want to say question that, but I don't know, it just makes me a little bit curious. But yeah, I'll stop right there for now.
I guess my thoughts of Angel were, yeah, like what, I guess I really liked her dynamics with everyone. How she was she was a girl's girl there, and I really liked her relationship with her brother Miguel, which I deem as an extension of her character. I One scene in particular was when she was confronting her mother over the death of her brother. I feel like that was a nice display of her character. She was kind of insecure of coming off as weak, like she was before, and it showed her care for her brother, how caring she was, and how far she's come along in regards of her own strength and self-acceptance, I think. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah, I liked Angel. I think she had one of the more interesting uh stories for me. I don't know if that's in part because she, at least to me, feels like the most fully fleshed out character and the character who we get like the most of her life from. Um, I love that she was so resilient. I loved how fierce her tenacity was, even though some of her dreams, while they were simple, considering who she was, her financial situation, and the time period, she had big dreams. Even a dream like owning a Chanel suit, which maybe for us can seem small today, but like considering the time period, considering her financial status, working at a grocery store and doing sex work on the side, that was a really big dream for her. And the fact that she had I guess the bravery and the nerve to dream so big, I loved. I will say, I'm not sure if she came across to me as the most like house mother type of character, uh, especially considering now that I'm thinking how many scenes there are in the book where she's not present. Um, I don't know. That didn't really come across to me as super house mother y. Did that come off to you too as? Did she come off to you too as being like a house mother type of vibe?
I think I definitely got at times. So the like sense of having responsibility for bringing other people up in some way, in relation to Venus Nuno Juanito. But you did say something that you, um, about Angel, about like tenacity and resilience, and just since you mention it, I'm curious if either of you have any thoughts on whether this sort of like having some sort of like tenacity and resilience, especially as like a femme person of color, is or female person of color, is like a trope that we get in writing sometimes because it's a character that we really want to like latch onto, or can like really easily admire, if that makes sense. But I guess the short thing I'm trying to ask is, do you see that as a trope in many sorts of stories, and do you think that that is being played out here with Angel or with any of the, I don't think I would say with any of the other characters, but with Angel in particular?
To me, I did feel like Angel was house mothery at times, not all the time, but certain moments in the story, like when she bought Juanito a sewing machine, and when she first met Venus and helped her uh, with the guy that was harassing her. That felt very mothery to me. I feel like sometimes the motheriness wouldn't be there. It would be more like um, a super elder sister, only at times. But I feel like the mother vibe was there. But for the resilience as a person of color, or tenacity as a trope, um, I I don't know. Um, if I didn't even know it was really a, as a trope. I guess I didn't really notice it there in this story as much, because um, the context, it makes sense for them all to be like all resilient and stuff. Um, so I guess I don't know where I'm going with this, but I hope that answered even like a fraction of your question. If this were any other story, I feel like I'd get a bit tired of it. But yeah, in this circumstance, it was fine. Uh,
Yeah, I will say that to Michael's question, I do think there is a trope of like the strong person of color or like the strong queer friend. Uh, I mean, I don't know about what the trope is called amongst other groups of color, but I know amongst Black people that's referred to as like the magical Negro. This character who is essentially just kind of here to like get you through all your trauma. Um, but I guess mm, I would say in some way they all kind of fall under that. I mean, they all show tenacity or resilience in some way, of course, some more than others. I probably would say that Angel shows the most. But hmm, I don't know. It's kind of hard for me to say that she does fall into that trope because she's not the only trans person of color in the story. We have Venus. But I will say that Angel seems to be more of the backbone to the other characters than Venus. That I guess is a part of her being mothery. So I guess to answer my own question, maybe in some way she is mothery. Um, so yeah. Um, hmm. What did we all think of Venus Extravaganza and her character? Just so okay.
Um, I I will say that frankly, this is one of the times where I was a little I don't even want to say disappointed, but maybe like just disheartened. With how just like how much bad stuff there is in Venus's story, and the way it ends. I think made it a little. I don't want to say hard to digest, and like I know it's not unbelievable, but I do always like want a like nice like a positive ending or some sort of like I don't know like nice like wrap up in a story, and we definitely did not get that with Venus. And I don't really like that, but that's my personal my personal opinion, of course.
If Angel was mother, then Venus was big sister. Um, um, Aside from her death, I really liked her energy, I guess. Um, Fun character, especially considering the circumstances. Um, Regarding the death, while I was reading that chapter, it was imminent. I could feel it coming, and I just hated it. I guess it wasn't um, the best thing to read, especially since I learned that the thing actually happened to the person that Venus was based on. Um, so yeah, Venus as a character, I liked her. I liked her dialogue. She really gave energy to a lot of the scenes that she was in. But the death and um, knowing the circumstances regarding the person she was based on, kind of tainted her death scene a little to me, knowing that they aren't entirely fictional. Um, yeah, that's it, I guess.
I would say I liked Venus, but I do kind of have an issue with her character simply because I think all of the characters seem so similar to me. They're not really written, in my opinion, to be vastly different. The only one I would argue is like vastly different would be Daniel. And I think that's only because he is the more masculine member of the house, while the other three are quite feminine. Two of them, of course, being trans women, but they're quite feminine, so they all kind of run together. I think if I were reading the physical copy of this book and not having the audiobook, which I listened to for this story, I would have kind of thought I was reading one character, one long POV. Uh, the audiobook, the reader does switch voices for each character. So, like that, of course, let me know who was speaking. But outside of that, Juanito, Venus, and Angel all kind of ran together and seemed very similar for me. Did you two have a similar experience, or did they all feel like vastly different characters to you?
It's a little funny you mentioned that because I also did the audiobook, and especially in the scenes where they talk about like childhood for Angel and Venus, there were a couple times I didn't necessarily like quite catch that it had switched over. I also did think the voices in the audiobook were a little bit ridiculous in the version I had, but it did give me like a good, yeah. I don't want to say laugh, um, but no, I definitely did see them run together quite a bit, and I do think it's funny you mentioned the thing about Daniel, and I think it's for the exact same reason.
Yeah, no, I agree with the both of you. I did not have the audiobook, so I I caught myself not I caught myself switching up the characters sometimes. Because they were that similar. I guess I tried to find differences in their dialogue, in their um I don't know, choice of words. If I had to guess, a rule of thumb that I had while reading it to know the character, Venus uses more slang, more Spanglish in her dialogue. I could be entirely wrong though, but that's how I got about it. And yeah, no, that's it. They were all pretty similar. And for Daniel, I totally agree. It was probably because he was the masculine person of the group, and that's why he was written with such a different voice. Um, yeah, hard agree for sure.
I do have a quick question on something you said, Arian. Did you find and I know you mentioned something about this earlier when you answered the icebreaker question, but did you find it like clunky to read the book with all of the random mixed in like one or two words of Spanish every sentence or two, to have to go and refer and figure out what they meant, or did it seem like they made sense when you were reading? Because I will say for the audiobook, I think, well, one, like, I'm very glad I do my Duolingo because I didn't have to look at many of the things or double check them. And I think for some of the ones I didn't know, I just like filled in based on inflection and context clues and hoped I was right, but I don't know if I would get the same experience in the physical copy.
Yeah, that's a good question. It didn't feel that clunky at times because, like you said, I did use context clues to try and fill me in, but also Duolingo helped a bit, and the fact that the Philippines was colonized by Spain, so I did have a bit of Spanish knowledge in my repertoire. So it did not feel that clunky to me, but I could imagine that for anyone without any like background knowledge or previous anything to Spanish feel would feel like it's super clunky. And yeah, there's English and Tagalog usually get mixed together as well, so that kind of was very much like that. So didn't it felt smooth enough. Yeah. Um did What about you, Jonathan? Did it feel like that for you as well, or?
It's funny you bring that up because it did feel a little clunky to me. I think, if I'm being honest, I interpreted the random mixed in Spanish to be kind of like a constant reminder that the characters are Latin. And I was like, yeah, we get it. They speak Spanish. Okay. Like, why do we keep mixing in so much Spanish? Um, and I also found it a bit odd because when Angel first meets Venus, Venus says, I don't really speak Spanish. Yet we get so much Spanish in her point of view. And I didn't really get why. I mean, okay, sure, maybe being around someone who's a Spanish speaker enough, you do pick up some things. I know I've done that before. Um, but it just is a little odd to me considering that she makes a point to say, I don't speak Spanish. And I'm not Hispanic, I'm Italian. Did you guys notice that her having said that and then getting so much Spanish in her point of view?
I actually forgot she was Italian until you said that, but I do think it's funny you mentioned the thing about just the reminder of them being like Hispanic Latina people, but I did notice too some of the things that they say. There's not, from my understanding and knowledge at least, like some of them there's doesn't seem to be any difference in like context or inflection between just translating directly to English. So when that was the case, I did kind of think like, this just means the exact same thing if you write it in English. Like we're not getting anything extra from having some of these in here. But no, it is funny thinking back about the Italian thing, because I almost completely lost that. Well, not lost it, but just forgot that it was a thing.
No, I was in the same boat as well. I forgot that Venus was Italian. Yeah, no, that was fun. That's funny. That's kind of funny. Yeah, no, I forgot for sure. Yeah, that's all.
And I do kind of want to say, I guess, before we move on from our previous question, uh, I found it kind of odd that both Angel and Venus, their characters are so similar because if you watch Paris is Burning, they both have two very different like tones of voice. They speak differently. I will say Angel's character, not Angel's character, Venus's character seems a bit more true to her character in the book, but Angel's character is not. She's a lot more soft-spoken, a lot more gentle. And in the book, she came off very rough to me, which I didn't understand that change. I don't know. That's like a random thought, but I wanted to say it before moving on. And what was I going to say? Ugh. Oh, before before we move on from Venus, I will say that I know earlier I said there was a scene that I would have put this book down on and not finished it, and that was the Venus rape scene in the bathroom from Sugar Cookie. That scene for me was just like, eh, why? Especially because we don't, uh, at least from Paris is Burning or any of the other resources that mention Venus, she never says that happened. So why have that happen to her character? And then why have the end result of that be her losing a really close friend? Um, I guess in some way it kind of serves as like a plot device for her to be so down on her luck that she meets and then of course immediately trusts Angel. But outside of that, I didn't really understand the inclusion of that. What did you guys think of that scene? Did that seem impactful for her character, or did it just kind of seem like a plot device to get her to meet Angel?
This for me was one of the things I think earlier when I first started talking about Venus, I just and about the book in general, some just felt like a lot, or um, I don't want to say unnecessary, but it does almost feel I don't want to say like an excuse to meet Angel, but definitely like an excuse to have like a good catalyst for moving that relationship forward so quickly. Um, yeah, and I the choice to include a sexual assault scene, especially in such like graphic detail, I think is a strong one to like put a lot of weight into. And I didn't feel like that in this case we like needed everything that was given to us in this scene.
Yeah, no, I agree with Jonathan. It felt very plot devicey. Um, it it was one of the parts that I skimmed through as well because I didn't really want to read it in its entirety. Um, but yeah, it was definitely a catalyst for her and Angel's relationship. So in that aspect, I guess, sure, it was all good. But yeah, I don't think it needed it to be um that graphic. Um yeah, yeah. No, that's it. Juanito is next, I feel, so I'll just save it for that.
And I guess again, I don't want to keep bringing up Paris is Burning because I feel like these are two separate properties, so it's not totally fair to compare them. But before I stop, I do want to say that Venus mentions in Paris is Burning that she doesn't like talking about her sex work. Uh, and she's like, seems to be very embarrassed by it. So I'm just curious why have that be so much of her story? And especially so much of it being so graphic when like she clearly didn't like talking about it. Um, that again is just another thing that I find a bit offensive, but whatever. So, like Aaron said, let's move on to Juanito. What do we think of Juanito?
I guess I'll go first this time because I feel like Juanito got the most graphic story arc out of all of them. Uh, First off, it was initially revealed that his father beat him when he was growing up, but then towards the end, uh, they revealed that it was worse than that, and he was actually being raped, and um, yeah, that was a lot to take in. And then when he got hooked on Tina, I really had to skim through most of that arc because I couldn't read it. It was just so foul. Um, um, in that at that point, I was invested in Juanito's character because, yeah, um, and I was just disappointed. I guess, like, damn. um, yeah, and then for it to be revealed that he contracted the virus and then he killed himself, just uh no, I'm sorry. I liked him as a character. I guess enough to the point that I was somewhat invested in him by the time that all of the addiction happened, and that was just unfortunate. So yeah, I feel like I was invested in him a bit more than usual, especially because of uh, the feminine, fruity ass childhood perspective that he got. And I guess I could relate to that. And we're very similar in age. I'm only like a year older than him. So that when he died, so that was just, yeah, I'm done. Yeah, you guys could go. Yay.
Um, I can go. I did some of the stuff I want to say I forgot about, but I guess maybe tried to like block it out, or um, it didn't stick with me as much. But I will say the parts where we see Juanito like spiraling into this um, like meth addiction and all of the associated stuff, and like this whole thing with the couch and the like blackmail, and more of like the really graphic scenes there, which I mean really is just like yet another form of sexual assault that we're getting a lot of. I know it was not like a like nice happy thing to read. And I don't know that I was like really satisfied with some of like the storyline after that, especially um, the way like Juanito's story just cuts off like that. But you know, that's it for me for now.
Yeah, I think to agree with the two of you, I don't know if I would say that I was emotionally invested in really any of the characters, but I do think out of all of them, I probably was most connected to Juanito simply because I don't know if I would say he and I are similar, but we have similar interests. Like, for example, I love sewing, I love all that kind of stuff. So from the get go of meeting him, I kind of related to him a little bit. Um, but to Arian's point, I didn't understand the the arc he has in the book. I didn't really understand the author's decision to take our two characters who are, I think, inarguably the most hopeful and I think have the potential for the brightest future, and then kind of ruin that after we spend so much time like really rooting for the two of them, um, for the two of them to stay together, for the two of them to have a happy life, especially considering how young they are when we first meet them. They're both only 14. Um, so yeah, and then also in my own research, I find it kind of disturbing the arc and then the end for Juanito's character simply because his real life counterpart is still alive. He did not kill himself. So why why do that to his fictional counterpart? And well, of course, I don't know Juanito in person, and I don't know really any of his story. But from what I could tell, he was never addicted to meth. So why do that to his character as well? Um, yeah. uh, yeah. Heartbreaking stuff. But I guess I'll ask, knowing that Juanito was still alive, what do you think of the author's decision to kill his character off?
I'm just even more confused now. Um, Knowing that, I feel like I wouldn't write something about a living person that is so. I don't want to say bananas because like some parts of the story were like the reality, um, for enough people, and to some extent still are today. But I mean, I could see it as an effort to be like, I will just make this as like far from anything as possible, so that maybe like the real living person can have no. I don't want to say opinion on it, but just have it like so far fetched, maybe that it's like not anything that the real Juanito could like give any commentary on. I don't know. I'm confused.
Um, yeah, I guess it was just to um like lend more credence to the fact that it was fictional. Like forget that the 90 at least like 90 or like a good chunk of the book is based on real people and real events that happened to them. I feel like um maybe he added it to drive home the fact that it really is just fiction, and I don't know. It's just yeah, that's it.
Yeah. And I guess let's move on to Daniel. What did we all think of Daniel's character? Outside of what we already said, we mentioned him earlier. What did we all think of his character?
You did make a comment in the last question about their ages, and I think Daniel was the only character whose age I was conscious of the whole time. Um, and I don't necessarily know why that is, but I definitely saw him as younger and caught him only being 14 when we first meet him. Well, when him and Juanito first meet, and that stuck with me with Daniel for some reason, but not for anyone else.
I feel like all the other characters had such conclusive endings. Like they either all they all died, so that's as conclusive as you can get to an ending. But Daniel's was really just there at the end. Um, yeah, no, that's it. I feel like for the most part of the story, he was just um the other half of Juanito, I feel. And yeah, that's my thoughts for now.
Sorry, go ahead, Jonathan. But I have a follow-up question based on something Arian just said when you're done.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I did think about this quite a bit. But you mentioned him being as the other half for um, Juanito. Do either of you guys think that either of those characters would work the same way in the story without the relationship between the two of them? Or that we would even get both of them without the relationship between the two of them?
Um, yeah, no, I don't think it would be the same because a large part of both of their characters were the fact that they were together. Like the entire last third of the book was just centered around them entirely. So if they weren't together, I feel like that would really impact whatever they showed for, or whatever they showed in terms of like um character. Yeah, for me at least.
Yeah, to Michael's question, I'm not sure if the story could have worked if they were not a couple. I think possibly so, considering that they were both members of the same house. And I guess just understanding how close-knit houses can be. I could see them having a life together as just like friends or roommates or whatever. Um, but I do think, to Arian's point, I'm not sure if Juanito's arc would be as impactful to Daniel if they were not lovers. I think it hits hardest for him and for us as readers because they are a couple. Um, so yeah. And I will say in general, Daniel to me, like Arian said, felt like such an extension of Juanito to where he almost didn't really have his own identity, in my opinion. And to Michael's earlier point about being conscious of Daniel's age the entire time, I agree. I was as well. And I think that happens for me mostly because there's no time skip with Daniel's childhood that we meet him in, and then his joining the House of Extravaganza. It's like I think immediately after he leaves home, he Venus finds him, and then he joins the house. So we kind of follow him throughout his entire life once we meet him, as opposed to the other characters. We jump from their childhood to the time they join the house. Um, does that make sense to you too? Did you notice that too? Or do you think it was a different reason that you were so conscious of Daniel's age?
I didn't catch that, but I think that probably does make sense. Or to me, like thinking back, I'm like, oh yeah, that probably is why I was so keen of Daniel's and not anyone else's.
Yeah, no, I agree. Um, I didn't catch that either, but I feel like that probably did help. I also feel like it was through his lens, like his inexperienced lens, that we got to see a view of like their day to day, I guess. So I feel like that just helped really highlight his, you know, his his youth, his age. Yeah.
And I guess before we move on from Daniel, I this is the another one of the real life stories that don't match the story in the book, because Daniel in real life did die. He was HIV positive, and he died, if I'm not mistaken, 3 months after Angel did. He did take over the house, but of course it was short lived. Um, and Juanito is the only one who's still living. Uh, and I believe it was Arian who earlier said that his story didn't feel concluded. And I think that's because by the time we end the story, Daniel is still living. Um, so yeah. What do you guys think of that switch? We already talked about, of course, the author's decision to kill off Juanito, but what do you think of the decision to keep Daniel alive, even though in real life that did not happen?
Um, I don't know. I think it's curious, and maybe another reason that I was possibly so conscious of his age is because his story also like is kind of still in the middle compared to everyone that is not alive. Um, so maybe that was another reason that I'm not picking up on. But hearing what you say about him like taking over the house in real life, I don't see the character that we got in the story doing that. So that's a little curious. And I also agree that it felt I don't know. I think if Arian says, but just that it felt like unfinished, not concluded. But yeah, that's it for me.
Honestly, I don't know, but um I applaud you for your research. Like I really admire how much research you put into every book you read. Like you get background on the author, and you just do some research. Yeah, like honestly, um I feel like I don't know. Probably the same thing with Juanito is just to drive home that it was fictional in my eyes, I guess. But yeah.
Well, thank you for saying that, Arian. That means a lot. I think I shared, I don't know if you were here or not, but as a child, I wanted to be a journalist. So research to me comes very naturally, especially if a book pisses me off, I'm going to Google something. Um, so that's why I did so much research on this book. Uh, but yeah, I know we kind of talked around the book a bit and not really any like specific plot questions. So I do have a couple. I don't have many. But I guess my first one is, were you surprised by Angel's mother's reaction to seeing her dressing as a woman the first time? Um, what did you think of that interaction?
Um, I don't know that I quite remember the scene, so I'm gonna ask you guys to tell me. Is this one in a silver dress?
I don't
No.
totally remember what she was wearing, but it's the scene where Angel leaves Jaime's house and then goes home with Miguel and sees her mother drunk, if that rings any bells.
Um, I think so. I will say what I do. I remember a scene where her mother says something about like like one of her sons is dead and the other one's in dresses. Is that the scene?
Your
If
mic's a
not,
little muffled. Can you say that again?
oh, I do. Sorry. There's a part where she says something about like, oh, one of my sons is dead and now one of them is in dresses. Um, and that to me was a little. I don't know if that's the scene, but that's what I'll make a comment on. Was a little. Um, felt like it was fulfilling this thing you see sometimes in um, like single mother households, or especially like single mother households of color, where like expecting like the boys to like man up and be the man of the house, and her just like resignation at knowing that that's not going to happen. um that did come through a little bit for me in that part, but if that's not the part you're asking a question about, then I will just gladly hear what you guys have to say.
Okay, so I didn't know what scene Jonathan was referring to until he mentioned heading home from Jaime's house. I did not know that that was her mother's first time seeing her in drag. The mother's reaction felt like she was used to it. I mean, if I'm remembering this correctly, um, it felt like she's seen her do it before with the way she reprimanded her. Like she felt resigned a little, kind of like, oh, she's doing this again. That's the vibes I got from it. But I don't know. I might be remembering the scene wrong. Um, yeah, that's all I've got to say.
Yeah, I agree with Arian. I found her reaction to be a little interesting. It seemed to me that she was more upset with the way Angel was dressed, like the kind of dress Angel was wearing, as opposed to the fact that she's wearing a dress. She was more bothered by how short the dress was, which I found kind of interesting for this being the first time you're seeing your child in a dress. Um, and I guess my follow-up question to that is, I'm not sure if you two noticed this, but essentially every character's parent who had ever seen them in drag or in women's clothing, Venus, Juanito, and Angel, they all equate queerness to sex work. Did that stick out to any of you guys? Like every single parent is like saying, okay, if you want to be gay, you're going to have to learn how to suck dick, or you're going to have to learn how to, have sex for money. Did any of you guys notice that?
I didn't, but I feel like that sentiment rings true with a lot of conservative people today, with the pushback and when their immediate reaction whenever something fruity comes along is immediately gay sex, and it's just, I never noticed it until now. I might have not even caught it, but yeah, that is interesting. It makes sense though. It tracks. Yeah.
I don't I don't know that I realized that it came from every parent. I definitely think I noticed it um, from some of them, but uh, outside of that, I feel like we were getting that a lot throughout the story anyway, and I think to me that was one of the uh, I want to say disappointing, and I know that sex work is real work, and at a time in the story is like really a survival tactic, and unavoidable for a lot of these characters. But I wanted to see more for some of them, and that was a little bit disappointing to me that I don't really think we did. But yeah.
Yeah, I will say I definitely found it kind of strange, but I do agree with Arian's earlier point, that that is something that I think a lot of conservative or homophobic people do. When they see homosexuality or think of homosexuality, their mind immediately goes to sex, as opposed to anything else. Um, so it wasn't necessarily unbelievable to me, but I do find it kind of odd because that same sentiment is what causes Juanito to be raped by his father. Because his father says if you want to be a princess, you're gonna have to learn how to get fucked or whatever he said. Um, which I found so odd. Like if you hate gay people, why are you having gay sex with your son? Um, I don't know. Did anyone else notice that like hypocrisy in that scene at all?
Yes, and this was another one of those places where I don't understand the reasoning by including like the detail and content here. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just, that was a real loop. Especially since it just, yeah, the beating was rational, but the rape was just kind of, uh yeah, it was very It was very um, hypocritical. It was strange, the reasoning, for sure.
Hmm. Yeah, very confusing scene to me. Um, and then I guess my follow-up question to my previous one is, why do you think Angel makes a distinction between her doing sex work and her brother selling drugs, especially considering the fact that they're both doing those kinds of work for survival? In her mind, what do you think makes that distinction or makes what she does more innocent than what her brother is doing?
Um, I I don't know that I have a real thought on what Angel thinks about it, but I do I do think there is sometimes some justification in thinking that when people choose drugs, they're like putting their lives at risk, and they're not necessarily doing that when they're seeking out a sex worker. Um, so that may feed into it, but I don't know outside of that I have any thoughts.
Um, I don't know if I'm remembering this correctly, but like while they were having a conversation in the diner, I think, Angel was like, um, was thinking about how drugs were killing people, and I guess the distinction is in when you're doing sex work, you're putting yourself at risk, mostly rather than other people at risk. So I feel like that's where she made the distinction. When you're dealing, you're putting others at risk and not just yourself. Because she was like, I think it's getting, the scene is becoming clear to me again. She's like, you're dealing to kids, she said, or something along those lines. And I think that's where her opposition was centered around. Yeah.
Yeah, you both make really good points that I hadn't considered. I think Aaron, you summed it up perfectly. Um, and Michael, you had a really good point too. I think when you are dealing drugs, you are opening yourself up to violence from the police, but also from your competitors. Whereas with sex work, of course, yes, you can be arrested and whatnot, and your clients can be violent, but your competitors aren't really looking to kill you. So that makes sense. That does make sense. And I guess I'm curious, what do you think causes La Loca, which is Venus's friend in the shelter, to believe her boyfriend's account of the sexual encounter over Venus?
I don't know if I thought that she actually believed it as much as she was just trying to like stick by her man and stick by what she knew and what she was comfortable with. At least that's what I interpreted or projected into the story.
Yeah, no, exactly the same thoughts as Michael. That's what I got from it as well.
And that's a really good point. Um, Especially because before they even become friends, La Loca does get the sense that her boyfriend wants Venus. So I guess you're right. Maybe she never believed him, but just didn't want to lose her little security blanket boyfriend. Um, I did also think it was an interesting parallel how she was crying just a few scenes before about her mother not believing her when her boyfriend raped her as a child, and then not believing her friend when her boyfriend raped her friend. Um, Very kind of like you just became your mother kind of moment. Um, did you two notice that parallel at all?
I did think it was hypocritical, to say the least.
Okay, I forgot about that moment until you brought it up. But yeah, for sure. It was, um, yeah, I've become my mother kind of moment.
And I guess we'll kind of skip ahead a little bit. What did you think of the relationship between Venus and Charles?
I liked Linda. um, I don't, I don't, I'm not sure. Especially because he like doesn't even want her in the end. And it feels like leading into it, like there's potential for like some, some like really nice thing to happen for Venus. We don't get that at all. Um, and I didn't really like that, or like this more, compounding of, people in the world only seeing her, um, in certain lights and not for like who I think she really is. Just kind of disappointing, but that's it. But I did like the scenes in the house and the little interactions with her and the wife. It made me chuckle a little bit.
Yeah, Linda, kind of cunty. Um, for I don't know if I'm remembering this correctly, but there was when she was getting a cab out of the whole fiasco. They kind of like hinted or teased or like kind of um implied that Charles had somewhat somewhat had feelings for Venus as well when he was disappointed that um she only saw him as another source of money. So I feel like that was there, I guess. Um I feel like Charles really was just a big part why Venus ended up like that in regards to the story. But yeah, Charles, yeah, he's whatever.
I think to both your points, yeah, I did like Linda. I kind of wish we would have got more of her. I guess I relate to her because I've kind of been a Linda in my own relationships. Um, and I found the dynamic between Linda and Venus so funny simply because, you must be delusional if you believe that, like, he's gonna choose you over his wife. But okay. Um, Yeah, that whole thing was interesting to me. But it added, I think, a bit of levity to Venus's story, which I can appreciate considering how awful her story is. I do believe that, of course, leads to her spiral into drug addiction, her feeling of loneliness. But I also find it kind of interesting how early in the book, I don't remember which part or who Venus is even talking to, she says that like her dream is to be a rich white woman and have a rich white man take care of her and have like the white picket fence and all that kind of stuff. So it's interesting that kind of like hate that she has for Linda. It kind of seems like just pure jealousy because there's even a part where Venus says something along the lines of, if this were a different kind of interaction, we actually could have been friends. Um, did that stick out to either one of you? That like jealousy, or did you think that that hate for Linda stemmed from something else?
Oh, I did kind of catch that, and I think that maybe is one of the reasons, that, and like you said, the like levity, or like little breath of, like, sitcom soap opera nonsense, did lighten the story. So maybe that's why parts of this stick out so much. Yeah, I do recall her saying that at the beginning, which is like, problematic in so many, other ways as an aspiration for a person of color. But Yeah, I did. I did catch that. I don't know that. I think Linda would feel the same way though.
I didn't catch that actually. What I caught was the fact that she wanted a big mansion, money, um, to be a trophy wife. I only caught that part, so I guess I just like forgot about the white part entirely, which is kind of yeah. But mm, yeah, what Michael said about Linda not wanting to be friends for sure. That would have definitely happened even if it was in a different circumstance. I feel like yeah, regardless of the circumstance, they would not. Linda would still have disdain for her because she's a yeah, and mm, and yeah, mm, that's it. This part of the story really was fun though, because it was all before the death. It was like where everything was lighthearted. So I do agree that's probably why this part sticks out quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I will say that this part of the book for me is where things began to look up. This is where I was probably the most engaged, and I was thinking, okay, we're finally going to get a little bit of happiness. Um, in some way, I knew what happened to the real members of the House of Extravaganza in real life, but I kind of thought, okay, maybe the author is going to kind of like turn things around and like let them live. Um, and then once we get Venus's death scene, I was like, oh, okay, we're back to the depressing stuff. And that's where I kind of like zoned out again. But yeah, and I
How?
think go ahead.
Oh, I would say, how do you feel about saying that in the part of the story that captured you the most was a straight white couple saving the relationship?
I don't know if I would say it's the fact that they're a straight white couple. I think it's more just the dynamic and like kind of the delusion of Venus. Like I said before, I love an unhinged character and like a delusional woman. I think they're just so interesting to read. So I was like, okay, I kind of like Venus now. And then she died, and I was like, well, that was the one thing I liked about the book, and it's gone. So, what's my next question? Hmm, I don't remember. But to skip towards the end a little bit, what did you guys think of Dorian's decision to come to Miguel's funeral in full drag? And I guess a two-parter to that is, do you side more with Dorian or with Angel on the conflict?
I guess I'll go first this time. I feel like Dorian had no business doing that or being there. Um, I don't know how funerals work uh, at that time, if there was any difference, but like they never interacted. I guess being there to show support for Angel makes sense, but it rubbed me the wrong way. I would definitely be on Angel's side. Like, there's a time and place to impart a lesson, and that was neither of them. Um, yeah, Team Angel, woo, that's it.
Um, I'll be honest that for whatever reason this part doesn't stick out to me. Maybe I was just like tired of death, or it was like getting towards the end of the book. Um, yeah, but I don't even recall any conflict between Miguel and Dorian, um, or don't know why I'm blanking on this scene right now. But sorry, and sorry for interrupting you. I did not intend to do that and get you off track.
That's okay. I will say that To Arian's point, I thought it was inappropriate. I mean, to give Dorian a little bit of credit, I understand her upset. I do think that it's wrong to ask as far as I know, Dorian was not trans, but she definitely felt most comfortable in drag. So it's wrong to ask someone to kind of change just for you. But at the same time, I do think that totally disregarding someone's rules or boundaries they've set for you to be a part of their life is kind of like making the whole funeral about you. And while I understand Dorian's point of view, it's like, well, the funeral isn't about you. It's also not your brother or your family. Um, and it's like, I side with Angel. I think if it were my friend, I would have rather you just not come and like call me later and, send condolences or ask me how it went or come over later. But like, don't come to my family's funeral and then disrespect me, but also disrespect my mother. Um, because I think it's important to remember that, like, yes, Angel's our main character, and we love Angel, but the funeral is also for her mother who just lost her son, and you have to pay some kind of respect to that, which is why I think that the entire house, even like Venus, who says that like she doesn't feel like a man at all, even she put some effort forth to try to kind of like butch it up a little bit to respect Angel's mother. So it's like I feel like Dorian was being a bad friend. And like Arian said, there's a time and a place for a lesson, and like now is not the time or the place uh, for that lesson. So yeah, and I know we kind of talked about uh, Daniel and Juanito's end a bit, but I'm curious. Before you got to their end and saw where their relationship went, where did you think it was going to go when they first left the house? Did you think they were going to have a happy ending? Did you think they were going to break up eventually? Or what were your initial thoughts there?
Go ahead, Ariane.
Okay. Sorry about that. I just figured you'd be tired of going before me. So yeah. I was really hoping that they'd have a good ending. I was really hoping that despite all of this, despite all the death, um, that they would, you know, make it out in one piece. I thought their conflict would have stemmed from them not saying goodbye to Angel, and that would have something would have happened. Okay, I thought that would be the center of the conflict, but no. What happened instead was the thing that happened, and we were given what we got. So, yeah.
Um, I of course also wanted a happy ending, like I want in every story. But I had a feeling it wasn't coming, so I steeled myself and tried to prepare for it. Yeah, I am a little bit sad that Juanito had to die. Of course, I did think he was gonna die during the whole like meth thing. So maybe I also was just like waiting for it to come because of that.
Yeah, I think to agree with the two of you, while I wanted a happy ending, I think just based on everything we had gotten up to that point, I assumed it wasn't going to happen because this author clearly has a penchant for depression and saddening his readers. So I assumed that we were not going to get anything happy, but I really do wish the author would have used their storyline as an opportunity to kind of give readers hope. Here is a young queer couple who are like obviously really struggling, having to leave their house, being homeless for some odd years, but still making it through and having love for each other at the end. I thought that they were going to break up simply because they would have outgrown each other, but I did not expect that Juanita was going to get addicted to drugs and then kill himself. I read that and I was like, what the fuck, Joseph? But okay. And also, like, as a publisher, if I read that, I would have been like, oh no, you got to change this ending. But whatever. Um, did you guys notice the parallel between Venus's drug addiction and Juanito's? Did that stick out to you at all?
Yes, unfortunately. And I don't know. I was a little disappointed too. And I mean, I feel like I kind of alluded to this at the beginning, but I don't know. Do we need everyone to be addicted to drugs and for everyone to have been like assaulted multiple times and then for everyone to die at the end? But no, I did notice some parallels in the actual addiction, and it felt, I mean, Venus is, of course, I feel like was fueled from her whole situationship with married man, and Juanito's too is to some extent fueled by his relationship at the first time, because he's trying to and like show off for Daniel, and I'm not sure of specific reasons at the end, but I do see that part as sort of like a trigger for both of them.
Yeah, I did not notice any parallels while I was reading it, but now that you mention it, and now that Michael has mentioned it, regarding love being the motivation for their addiction, or like not motivation, but like the kind of like catalyst. It was just, um, yeah. And there's this part before Juanito does the drugs that he's like, oh, I don't want to end up like Angel, and yeah, it was just one thought, one throwaway sentence before he got addicted. I would have liked it better if Angel was more referenced during the addiction, or if Juanito was more of thinking of Angel more, because like, yeah, give um the House of Impossible Beauties, right? Like give some give some references, give some callbacks. Like she's dead, and you, because of drugs, and you're taking drugs. That would remind you of her. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, woo.
Yeah, I definitely noticed some parallels there, which I think is what made Juanito's arc the most confusing for me because Arian is right. Just a few moments before Juanito tries meth for the first time, he says, I deserve better than this. I deserve more than just to be an addict. Um, so then, only a few scenes later, why do you try meth? Especially considering that there was really no pressure. I mean, sure, you could say, well, he wanted to feel cool with all of his coworkers. Okay. But like outside of that, there's really no massive pressure to try drugs. Um, but also, that does remind me of the scene where Juanito and Venus go to, is it Jersey? And they stay in that hotel room. I was so confused as to why Venus, who is, while she's not the mother of the house, she is kind of like one of his guardians, considering that she's obviously older than him and one of the oldest in the house. Um, why she would give a 15-year-old or 14-year-old kid cocaine? I was like, why? Did you guys notice that at all? Like that decision to give a child cocaine?
Um, I'll just say I'm glad that I was not so cognizant of age in this scene. Um, yeah, I don't understand. It doesn't it doesn't make sense to me to make that part of the story. just yeah, I mean, you can't like see me like making these faces or moving my hands, but yeah, I'm confused.
Yeah, that shit was crazy to me, but I feel like it kind of made sense with Venus's character. She was always more of the reckless kind, but like that doesn't make sense as well. Cause like think about it for a second. Why would you give drugs to kid? Um. Oh, regarding kid. Um. Um. I'm just throwing this out there, but it was so scummy that Paul called Juanito a kid. Like they were talking about their ages, and Paul directly called him a kid because that was what he thought of him as, and then he proceeds to, gross. Yeah, I'm just throwing that out there. But other than that, yeah, Venus was kind of yeah. I'm also throwing this out there, just cause whenever I thought or imagined Venus, I thought of that one scene in RuPaul's Drag Race where someone called Detox Venus Delight, and she was wearing that neon yellow wig. So that's what I imagined Venus the entire time. Yeah, there. She was wrong for that, for real.
I think to Arian's point, it's interesting that you point out Paul calling Juanito a kid. I think that stemmed more so from Juanito's obvious innocence and like just his naivete that he seems to have about the way the world works. Not really his age, because I don't think he's even that much older than his coworkers were. But he has not had the life experiences that they have, in terms of like drugs and sex and all that kind of stuff. Well, I guess to be fair, sex because he's a sex worker, but at least with drugs. Um, did that stick out to you, Michael? Paul calling him a kid and then, wanting to have sex with him?
I don't think I remember Paul saying that. Um, but I did like the whole thing with Paul just felt so gross.
Yeah. And I know we already talked about the ending a little bit, but I'm curious, what did you all think of how the story ends? And would you have wanted to end a different way? Even though we, of course, get a sad ending, would you have wanted the ending to be something else?
I, of course, would have wanted something else. I always want some sort of um, like closure or nice wrap up. And I think we had opportunity for that maybe in a couple places, and we didn't really get that. And all like the part of like Angel being like, "Oh, I go on the bus just so people are go on the bus, go on the subway just so that people are touching me." I was like, "This is so sad." I don't know, and that scene really, really stuck out to me for some reason. But no, of course I didn't like it.
Um, yeah, not I didn't. I wasn't a fan of it either. Um, there are multiple ways the author could have just given them a happy ending, or even like an okayish ending, considering the circumstances. They could still keep the drug addiction there, just have Juanito, you know, put the work in rehab, not contract AIDS, but somehow they connect with Angel, and everything could go on track, and they could have their okayish ending. Um, yeah. Um, both of them could have survived. It was just, oh, okay. Now that I think about it, I do not like this book as much as I initially thought I did. But yeah, woo.
This is definitely one for me too. The more I learned about the real story, the less I liked the book. I think when I first finished it, I was like, okay, this is like a 3.5 for me. It's not horrible, but it's not my kind of book. And then the more I learned, I was like, oh, this is like definitely like a 2 for me, out of 5. But Yeah, I mean, to agree with both your points, I, of course, would have liked a happy ending. I'm okay with the way it ends. I mean, especially if we're considering the fact that maybe the author wanted to include at least a little bit of reality with how their stories end. That's fine. But one thing that disturbed me is I found out in real life when Angie Extravaganza died, uh, there were still several members in her house, even after Juanito and Daniel left. Like, well, in real life, they didn't leave, but um, even towards the end of her life, she had a very full house with like a lot of children. And she never allowed her duties as the house mother to slip, no matter how sick she was, until, of course, she got too sick to carry on her duties. Um, and at her funeral, hundreds of people from New York City came and they all talked for hours about how, with her death, Ballroom is dead because she was Ballroom. She was the fabulousness. She was the fierceness. She was the extravaganza. Her name was Extravaganza. And I was like, why would the author not have that be the ending? Just to kind of leave the readers with a notion of just how important and iconic she was, and also to show that, like, this woman who had a, tumultuous life, she is like the backbone of the ballroom scene, and she is one of the reasons why we have the culture we have now. I think of, again, not to bring up Paris is Burning too much, but I guess one final thing is a lot of our modern day like queer colloquialisms like shade and reading and cunt and fishy and all these different things stem from the extravaganzas. And then even the ones that don't necessarily stem from them do stem from 80s ballroom culture. And it's like, I think it's important for young queer people to know, like, these are your icons. These are the people who you have to thank for the culture you have today. Um, and it just was disturbing to me that we didn't get any of that at the end, because that is so important. But whatever. Um, I guess, what do you two think of that? The real life ending for Angie and then the book ending for her.
Um, I know you mentioned this earlier, but I find it hard to have something even remotely like the real life ending, given that we don't have like any view of Angel like in the ballroom scene in the story. It's centered around that, but never there. So I think to like bring in all these people that we like, maybe, you know, I mean, we don't like see them, but like have an awareness of them in the periphery, and then all of a sudden they're there at the end of the story, makes for a strange ending. So I can maybe justify it for that reason, but at the same time, like I didn't write this book. I've not written any long books, but I don't know like why we don't want to take at least a little bit of an opportunity to like show something so positive, given all of the other things that happen, especially knowing that this is, um, pulled very heavily from real people who, I'm sure have had their stories or experience, as you mentioned, like not only ingrained in queer culture, but I'm sure like taken and told outside of, their ownership plenty of other times.
Okay, yeah. I've there was one scene at the end after Angel's dead where uh Daniel calls Pepper and they cry and mourn over Angel's death. And that's like the only reference or nod to anything outside of the house going on. Um or was that Angel's or was that Dorian's death? I don't know, but it was one of them, maybe both of them. and that was it. I do wish that they would have incorporated more of the peripheral characters and like the implied presence of other characters. This yeah, it's definitely mentioned in the story how the House of Extravaganza was fabulous and had an impact in the scene, but it was nowhere to be felt in the end. So, um, yeah, I feel like they could have done that differently for sure. Yeah.
And Michael, you brought up a really good point about how even though we're focusing on a house that was iconic in the ballroom scene, we don't really get any scenes of them actually performing or walking in these categories, even though we're told over and over again how fierce of a winner both Angel and Venus were. And then, of course, we get the one scene of Juanito walking and winning his category. I'm curious, what do you think of the author's decision to include so little of the very thing that these people were known for?
It's weird, and I think too of the, and like granted, maybe I just filled some of this in because I have some like close enough pop culture references that I could like add in some backstory. Maybe that is what the author intended. But even thinking like there's a scene, I don't remember who, but someone is like admiring like all of their trophies. And I'm like, this is like literally like 100 trophies or something on the wall. Like we could have gotten one evening, one night, um, to I don't know, help us see these characters in what is supposed to be like their element and the thing that really brought them all together.
Wait, are you waiting for me to answer? Because I thought that was a question directed to Michael.
That was a general question. So yeah, I was kind of waiting for you.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, no, I definitely agree with Michael. I remember the trophy scene. I don't know who was admiring it, but the the scene with Juanito in the ballroom, I feel like that was probably the peak of the story, um, or at least up there, because you get to see Juanito interact with Pepper, you get to see him interact with other people, and the snake. Um, yeah, it was very different from the rest of the story. Um, and I do wish we got more of that. Hard agree.
Yeah, you're right, Arian. I do believe that that is probably one of the strongest scenes in the story. I think it evokes emotion very well, but I also think that's one of the moments where the author's writing is the strongest. Um, and yeah, it just kind of gives us a little peek into the ballroom scene for those of us who don't have any experience of it. So I did find it so strange that we got so little of that, especially since that is like one of the only what I would consider fun scenes in the book to be. Like, why suck out all the fun? But okay. Um, and I also found it odd that like the book doesn't really go over at all how the house is formed, how they became iconic. We just kind of see different people joining and then their depressive lives. I think in a book that's centered around this house, you definitely need to include a bit of like how they became so well known and how they became such fierce competitors as opposed to just kind of okay, now they're on top, but how, why? um do either one of you wish we would have got more of that in the book at all?
Yes.
Yeah, pretty much, yes. Very correct, very straight to the point. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm curious, what do you think of the author's decision to only include the traumas these characters have faced as opposed to some of the joy they had? For example, two of the members of the house, I don't know if you two know this reference, but they went on to choreograph the Madonna Vogue video and then got to tour with her for like so many years. And they became like global superstars. Angie became famous before her death because of Paris is Burning. And the house just achieved so many good things outside of the struggles they faced. What do you think of the author's decision to kind of omit all of that good stuff, all of the really cool moments, like being able to tour with Madonna? Like that's really cool in the 90s when she was like on top. Um, what do you think of the decision to omit all of that and just focus on the traumas in this book?
I will preface and say that this is just speculation, and I don't, fully understand the motives outside of, what we've just talked about in this meeting. But I think that people like don't want to put something like that down. Like it is just like an easy way to draw people in, especially when they, are already fascinated by other parts of the story because it's something that they've not been, like exposed to, or just like feels really novel. Um, to have these like really extreme things happening. Um, and that maybe that was just sometimes maybe it's just a device to get people to engage or to keep them engaged um, until the end.
I I don't know. I guess I have no idea what the author's intentions were either, but if I had to guess, it was just to dramatize everything. Um, I don't know. It's, I guess, if I had to say, just to give the book more seriousness, I guess, since it's such a serious topic. Not that books can't have, fun moments and highs and not have incredible lows either, but like, I guess he just really wanted to focus on the nitty gritty, um, grim sadness to it all.
Yeah, I agree with the two of you. I guess the author really did want to focus on the melancholy of the story. But I just find it so strange to omit all of the good stuff they accomplish. I mean, if you think about it deeply enough, the extravaganzas who went on to choreograph Madonna's Vogue video and then go on tour with her are the reason why people who are not in New York City, never have been or never been involved in the ballroom scene, even know what voguing is. They're that iconic, and the house is that iconic. And it's like, what an amazing thing that this house accomplished, and we have to thank this house for, but then to leave it out just feels so strange, especially for someone like Jose Cassara, who claims he is so fascinated and so in love with the house. It's like, well, why leave out the really cool stuff? But whatever. And I will ask, do you guys believe this book falls under the kind of like category of trauma porn, or do you believe that like it deserves better than that? Like it's not just trauma porn.
Um, I'll say for me, it felt like more trauma than was needed to like get the same story, and a lot of it to me felt I mean it was a long story. Like I think the audiobook was like 16 hours if I listened at regular speed. Um and just some of the detail we get to me was not necessary, and I think actually in some cases like letting readers fill in may have actually served the author better, or served the story better, without like going into such like graphic explicit detail on some of these things. But no, I think in this case it was too much. I don't think you could tell this story without including some, especially given like the setting and all of the context associated with it, and the time period and culture at the time. It's impossible to avoid or not acknowledge and have it be believable. But like it is just, it was a lot. It was heavy. I was like listening to it at work once or twice and had to just like stop. So I'm like, I can't like listen to this in the middle of the day in the office. I need to like wait until I'm like not around people, because it's just too heavy and too much sometimes.
Um, um, I don't know, honestly. I agree with Michael that a lot of it could have been better left unsaid, or just implied, or just not so graphic. Um, some of it was needed for sure, but did it really have to go to the lengths that it did, to the extent that it did? Maybe not. Um, would I consider what what do you call it? What did you call it? Trauma porn, tragedy
Yeah,
porn.
trauma porn. Yeah.
um, um, I guess I wouldn't consider it that, but it's so close to it that I could, that you could do that. Um, yeah, it's either there or nearly there for me.
Yeah, I agree with the two of you. I think for me, it does fall under that category simply because now I know just how much of this trauma was the author's imagination and not reality. I understand including the harsh realities these people face because it's important to have a reminder for younger queer people or queer people who didn't live in New York City during the 80s and during the AIDS crisis, just how horrible and scary life could have been as a queer person of color during that time period. But why fictionalize so much of it? That for me just kind of seems like you want to make the most traumatic book as possible. Um, and that kind of reminds me of a book we read a few months back, Light from Uncommon Stars. And that book is widely criticized as being trauma porn. And I'm like, if you think that's trauma porn, read this book. Um, so yeah. And I guess a question, a kind of a more broad question for our culture. What do you think of drag culture and ballroom culture being more mainstream in recent years? And do you believe that is a benefit to our community, or do you think it's harmful to our community?
It makes me happy to have more visibility. And I know like part of the visibility thing would just be present anyway, maybe with or without these things, because of like social media and the reach of the internet. But I mean, I'm not old, and I really had like no, I think no exposure. I also like grew up in a very rural area, but really had like no exposure to drag or anything, especially not positive exposure, where it was like shown in positive light. And if I did, it was obviously like as a, like as a punchline or a trope or something. So having stories and entertainment out there that has like more of a positive light, I think is a good thing. About the, I don't remember the second part, but I remember the thought it triggered, which was that do I think it's harmful? Maybe I don't think so, but I do think that to certain audiences and certain groups that maybe have trouble empathizing or engaging, with people outside of their realm of comfort or outside of their cultural norms, that it just enforces stereotypes in those groups. But I like to think that as a whole, and for the majority of people, that's not true.
Yeah. The visibility that the popularity of drag as a whole has produced, yeah, I feel like it got a lot of people more used to the idea or the thought of someone dressing up in women's clothing and stuff like that. But yeah, it just gave it more like, I don't know, like more realness to it, I guess. Like, yeah, like it's not really just a joke anymore. It's, also an art form or a way of being, I guess. Um, I guess I could see where people could find it a detriment. Um, like what Michael said, reinforcing stereotypes and like some queens on the show being saying that RuPaul's Drag Race has commercialized drag when it was like supposed to be counterculture in and of itself. So it kind of muddies or kind of dilutes the original essence of it to appeal to a wider audience. But like, I guess that's good for the visibility anyway. There's a trade-off. Um yeah, I'd say it's more of a plus than a drawback.
Yeah, I think you both make really good arguments. I do agree that the visibility is great. I mean, there are people who, like Michael said, grow up in rural or more conservative areas, who wouldn't have an access to being able to see drag or other queer people outside of something like Drag Race or any other, queer or um or drag television series. Um, but I also do see it as being a bit of a detriment. I think that as these cultures leave their original communities, you get people outside of the community who, for some reason, now believe that since they've watched a season of Drag Race, they know what drag is. And they get to tell drag queens what to do. And then also, I think in terms of ballroom, I remember whenever I watch Drag Race and one of the queens does any sort of voguing thing for their lip sync, I always see queens who actually are involved in the ballroom scene on social media saying, like, hey, that's actually not voguing. You're just like waving your arms around. You're not voguing. And then even with like colloquialisms and slang, it's interesting to me seeing so many queer terms and like terms that are meant for trans women enter into the straight world. Like for example, I always see cis women and like gay men calling themselves dolls these days, when like actuality that is only meant for trans women, yet because it's left the community it's meant for, people have watered down these terms and caused them to mean something else. So yeah, yeah. It kind of goes both ways. I guess I'll leave it there. It goes both ways. And I guess my final question is, would you be interested in reading a memoir that Juanito Extravaganza wrote? Do you have any interest in doing that? It wouldn't be now, and it wouldn't be probably anywhere in the near future, but eventually, would you be open to reading that book in this club?
I would be open to reading the book for sure. And yes, that's all.
Okay, I just did a quick Google search. Is it the Queer Latino Testimonio?
No, it's not that book.
Okay, never mind. But yeah, no. Yeah, I'd be interested. Why not?
Okay, cool. I'd be kind of down. I mean, I'm curious to see just how much of the story we get in the book stacks up to Juanito's own accounts of his life. But yeah, that would be probably very, very far future. So, but still good to know. Okay, well, I think we can move on unless any of you guys have any last minute thoughts, questions, any characters you want to go over, plot lines we missed, anything before we move on to something else?
Nothing else from me about this book.
I'm all good. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's transition to our book for next month. I know I mentioned it last meeting, but I'm experiencing a little bit of fatigue from all of these traumatic stories we've been reading back to back. So I do want to read something lighter. And honestly, I kind of want to read a romance that I haven't read the book, so I can't promise a happy ending, but I think has a happy ending. So there's a book I chose called The Emperor and the Endless Palace by Justinian Huang. I will go ahead and send a link to that book in the chat, and you guys can read the description and let me know what you guys think.
I'll just say when I Googled this, it classified it as romantasy as the genre, and I've never seen that. So that sounds exciting.
Yeah, I'm all for it. A college student? Hey, yeah. I wouldn't mind.
Okay, it's a fantasy and a romance, like Michael said. It has to do with like time travel and like lovers finding each other through different timelines. So sounds cool. I know Michael loves fantasy, so it sounds like it's up your alley. So okay, I'll go ahead and put us down for that book. I was thinking next month we meet on the last Sunday, like usual, on the 25th. Does that work for the two of you?
Yes.
I'm not sure because I don't have my work schedule out yet, but probably it might.
Okay.
I'll let you guys know if I can't make it. So.
Okay. And with the time, I know we switched for this month to a different time. I would like to switch back simply because this for me feels a bit too late in my day. And I think the meetings are a bit more engaging when we meet during the daytime, or at least in my opinion. Um, and if I'm being honest, I only really moved the time to accommodate one person, and that person did not come to this meeting or the last. So I'm going to assume they're not going to come to any other meetings, considering this book was one of their recommendations. So what do you guys think of going back to 12 p.m. PST and then whatever time that is for you guys. Or do you guys want to stay at this time?
Both times work fine for me this time, but I'm okay with an earlier time as well.
Yeah. I can make both times work. It's funny you say later in the day because I am definitely 3 hours behind you, so it is almost midnight for me. But yes, I am fine with either time. Yeah, but you're the boss, so you get to make those decisions.
Okay, good. So I want to go back to 12. So let's try it again next month, and then we'll check in and see how things fare out for those of us who are in earlier time zones. So I'll put us down for the 25th of August at 12 p.m. PST for The Emperor and the Endless Palace by Justinian Wang. You'll probably see that on book clubs, and you'll see a Discord channel created in like the next hour or so. So yeah, and before we go, does anyone else have any last minute questions, comments, concerns, anything you want to talk about? Could be about the book, about the club, about the queer community, whatever. Any questions?
I don't have any questions, but just my monthly reminder or like message of gratitude to both of you for participating, and to Johnathan for always keeping everything organized and well moderated.
No, for real. Yeah, none of this would work out without you. The questions guiding the meeting, and yeah, appreciate it.
Thank you, but don't let my head get too big, because I can be a dictator if I get there. So thank you. Okay, well, I guess that's it. I'll see you both, hopefully the 25th of next month at 12 p.m. to discuss the book. And if not, I'll see you guys when I see you. You
All
both have
right,
a
see you
nice
guys.
day and night.
Yeah, have a great month.
You too.
Well, bye, guys.
Bye bye.
Bye.